In a forgotten neighborhood still asleep at 5:30 a.m., a father quietly teaches his 9-year-old son how to fry eggs, control the heat, and remember that the elderly woman at the end of the street doesn't like too much pepper. Every day, the boy carries that breakfast to the porch of an old house where a lonely woman always waits in her rocking chair. Until one morning of pouring rain when the boy steps inside her home for the first time and the familiar scent of mint tea makes the woman tremble as she begins asking about his father. Days later, the entire street is sealed off by police, and dozens of black limousines line up in front of the small house, exposing a truth no one ever expected. Quick pause, tell us where you're watching from, and hit subscribe. Tomorrow's story is even more powerful. The alarm clock didn't go off because Henry never needed one. 5:30 a.m., same as yesterday, same as the day before that. The 9-year-old boy sat up in bed, his worn blue socks already on his feet. He'd learned to sleep in them during winter because the floors got too cold. He rubbed his eyes, stretched once, and headed downstairs without making a sound. The kitchen light was already on. Matthew stood at the counter, his tall frame hunched slightly as he measured coffee grounds with the precision of a surgeon. At 35, he moved like a man who'd learned early that wasted motion meant wasted time, and wasted time meant missed opportunities. His hands were steady, careful. The coffee scoop scraped against the container in a rhythm Henry had memorized years ago. "Morning, Dad," Henry whispered, though there was no one else to wake up. Matthew turned, and his face softened immediately. "Morning, son. Sleep okay?" "Yeah." Henry climbed onto the step stool next to his father. "Are we making the eggs first or the toast? What do you think?" Henry considered this seriously. His forehead wrinkled the way it always did when he was thinking hard. "Eggs first, because if we do toast first, it gets cold while we're cooking the eggs." "Smart kid." Matthew handed him a carton of eggs. "2 today. She mentioned last week her appetite wasn't great, so let's not overwhelm her." They worked in comfortable silence. Matthew cracked the eggs into the pan, while Henry carefully placed 2 slices of wheat bread into the toaster. The butter dish sat between them ready. Everything had its place, its purpose, its moment. "Dad." Henry watched the eggs begin to sizzle. "Why do we do this every single day?" Matthew didn't answer right away. He never rushed answers to important questions. He adjusted the heat, tilted the pan slightly, then looked at his son. "Come here for a second." Henry stepped off the stool. Matthew knelt down so they were eye level. "What do you think kindness is, Henry?" The boy's face scrunched up again. Like, being nice to people." "That's part of it." Matthew's voice was gentle but firm. "But real kindness, the kind that matters, isn't about being nice when you feel like it. It's about showing up every single day, even when you're tired, even when no one's watching, even when you don't get anything back." He tapped Henry's chest lightly. "It's an obligation we have to this world, not a favor we're doing that deserves a thank you." Henry nodded slowly, processing this the way he processed everything seriously, thoroughly. "Does Mrs. Charlotte know that?" "She doesn't need to know it. We just need to do it." Matthew stood back up and returned to the eggs. "Remember what I always tell you about the pepper?" "Not too much. She doesn't like a lot of pepper." Henry recited it like a prayer. "Kindness has to be thoughtful, not careless." "Exactly right." The toast popped up. Henry grabbed it carefully with his small fingers and placed each slice on the waiting plate. Matthew slid the eggs on top, their edges perfectly crisp, but not burnt. A light dusting of salt, barely any pepper. A small sprig of parsley from the pot on the windowsill. Henry had grown it himself from seeds. Matthew wrapped everything in a clean cloth napkin, the kind his own grandmother had used, and tied it into a neat bundle. He held it for a moment, looking at it like it was something precious. "This right here," he said quietly. "This is how we tell the world we care. Not with big gestures, not with money we don't have, with time, with attention, with showing up when someone needs us to." Henry took the bundle carefully, holding it with both hands. The street was still dark when Henry stepped outside. The air bit at his cheeks, and he could see his breath in small clouds. The neighborhood was old, the houses small and huddled together like they were trying to keep warm. Most people were still asleep. Most people had another hour before they needed to face the day. But Henry walked this route every morning like clockwork. Mrs. Charlotte's house sat at the end of the street. It was different from the others, bigger, older, the kind of house that probably had stories buried in its walls. The paint was peeling in places. The garden looked like it had given up years ago. But the porch light was always on, and Mrs. Charlotte was always sitting in that rocking chair. She was there now. A small, elderly white woman wrapped in a thick shawl, her white hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her hands rested on her lap, trembling slightly. She wasn't looking at anything in particular, just staring out at the empty street, like she was waiting for something that never came. Henry climbed the 3 steps to her porch. His footsteps made the wood creak. "Good morning, Mrs. Charlotte." The old woman's head turned slowly. When she saw him, something shifted in her face. It wasn't quite a smile, more like relief. Like she'd been holding her breath and could finally let it out. "Good morning, sweetheart." Her voice was soft, worn thin by age, but still warm. Right on time as always. Henry handed her the bundle. "Dad made sure the eggs aren't too peppery today, and the toast is the wheat kind you like." Mrs. Charlotte took the bundle, but she didn't unwrap it right away. Instead, her hands, those trembling spotted hands, reached out and grasped Henry's fingers. She held them longer than usual, tighter than usual. Her eyes searched his face with an intensity that made Henry stand very still. "Henry," she said slowly, "tell me something. What does your father do for work?" "He works at the insurance office downtown during the day, and sometimes he does night shifts at the hospital, cleaning mostly. He says honest work is good work no matter what it is." Mrs. Charlotte's grip tightened. "And does he like anything particular to drink or eat?" Henry thought about this. "He really loves mint tea. He drinks it every night before bed. Says it helps him think clearly." He paused. "Why?" The old woman didn't answer. Her eyes had gone distant, like she was seeing something far away, or maybe something from a long time ago. Her breathing quickened slightly. "You look like him," she whispered. "You have his eyes." "People say that a lot." Henry smiled, not understanding why Mrs. Charlotte's hands were shaking even harder now. "Dad says I got lucky because his eyes are nice." Mrs. Charlotte released his hand suddenly and turned her face away, but not before Henry saw something glisten on her cheek. "Mrs. Charlotte, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart." Her voice was thick. "Just an old woman being sentimental. You should get home before your father worries." "He doesn't worry. He knows I'm responsible." But Henry took a step back anyway. "I'll see you tomorrow, okay?" "Yes." Mrs. Charlotte clutched the bundle of food to her chest like it was something infinitely valuable. "Tomorrow. Please, please come tomorrow." "I always do," Henry said simply, then headed down the steps. Behind him, Mrs. Charlotte watched until he disappeared around the corner. Then slowly she stood from her rocking chair and walked inside her house. That same morning across town, in a cramped office that smelled of burnt coffee and old paper, Matthew sat at his desk staring at an insurance claim form. The words blurred together. His head throbbed. It had been happening more often lately. These headaches, these flashes. He rubbed his temples and tried to focus, but the fluorescent lights overhead felt like needles pushing into his skull. He closed his eyes. Immediately, images flooded in, disjointed, fragmented, like watching a movie through shattered glass. A woman's face, white kind, leaning down toward him. Her smile was gentle. She smelled like lavender. He could smell it now, sitting in this office as clearly as if she were standing right next to him. Then the image shifted. Darkness, loud voices. Someone was crying. Was it him? Was he the one crying sirens, wailing in the distance, getting closer, until Matthew's eyes snapped open? His heart was racing. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Not again," he muttered, reaching for the bottle of painkillers in his desk drawer. He dry swallowed 2 pills and took a deep breath. Just stress. That's what the clinic doctor had said last month. Too many hours working 2 jobs, not enough sleep. His brain was making up nonsense because it was exhausted. That had to be it. It had to be. His phone buzzed. A text from Henry made it home safe. Mrs. Charlotte seemed really happy today. "Love you, Dad." Matthew smiled despite the lingering pain in his head. He typed back, "Good job, son. See you tonight." He put the phone down and tried to return to work, pushing the images away, burying them like he'd buried so many other things he couldn't explain and didn't want to examine too closely. Back at Mrs. Charlotte's house, the old woman sat in her library, surrounded by silence and memories. The metal box lay open on the table in front of her. She'd been sitting here for over an hour, unable to move, unable to think clearly. Her mind kept circling back to one conversation, one simple, innocent conversation with a 9-year-old boy. Mint tea. He drinks it every night. Such a small detail. Why did it matter so much? Because 26 years ago she'd adopted a little boy who refused to sleep without his mint tea. She'd made it for him every single night, sitting beside his bed telling him stories until his eyes grew heavy. It was their ritual, their special thing. And when he disappeared, she'd kept making that tea. For months, years even, just in case he came back. Just in case he walked through the door one day and asked for it. She'd finally stopped making it, but she'd never thrown away the tea tin. Charlotte stood abruptly and walked to the kitchen. Her hands moved automatically, opening the highest cabinet, reaching to the very back, where she'd hidden it behind flour and sugar containers that never got used. The tin was still there, covered in dust. She pulled it down and held it against her chest. "I'm losing my mind," she whispered. "This is crazy. It's been 25 years. The chances are impossible. Impossible." But her hands were already moving to her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she needed, Detective Morrison, the private investigator who'd been searching for her son since day one, the only person who'd never given up, even when everyone else told her to. She dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Harrington, it's been a while." "James," her voice shook. "I need you to run a background check, quietly, discreetly." There was a pause. "On who?" "A man named Matthew. He lives at the end of my street. I don't have his last name yet, but he has a 9-year-old son named Henry. He works at an insurance office downtown and does night shifts at County General Hospital." "May I ask why?" Charlotte closed her eyes. "Just do it, James, please. And I need DNA comparison authorization forms prepared. Rush delivery." Another pause, longer this time. "Charlotte, are you saying—" "I'm not saying anything yet. Just find out everything you can about this man. His birth records, adoption records, if they exist, medical history, everything. And James," her voice hardened, "I need it by tomorrow morning." "That's going to be difficult. I'll pay whatever it costs. Just get it done." She hung up before he could protest further. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to set the phone down. She walked to the window and looked out at the street, at the small, worn houses at the neighborhood she'd chosen to live in 5 years ago, despite having the wealth to live anywhere in the world. She'd moved here deliberately, to this poor, forgotten corner of the city, because 20 years of searching in mansions and penthouses had yielded nothing, and she'd had a wild, desperate thought. What if he was here? What if whoever took him had kept him close? What if he'd grown up right under her nose, living a completely different life? It had seemed insane at the time. Her therapist had called it geographical magical thinking, but she'd done it anyway. And now, "Please," she whispered to the empty room, "please let me be right, just this once." The next morning came too quickly and too slowly at the same time. Henry woke at 5:30 as always, but something was different. The sky outside his window was darker than usual. He heard the sound before he even got out of bed. Rain. Not just rain, a downpour. The kind that turned streets into rivers and made everything cold and miserable. He padded downstairs anyway. His father was already in the kitchen, but he was standing at the window, looking out at the storm with a frown. "Maybe we should skip today, son. That rain is coming down hard." Henry shook his head immediately. "We can't skip. Mrs. Charlotte will be waiting. She'll understand. We can go tomorrow when—" "Dad, you said kindness is about showing up every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Henry looked up at his father with those serious eyes. "Were you lying?" Matthew stared at his son for a long moment, then slowly smiled. "No, I wasn't lying." He ruffled Henry's hair. "Let me get you a better jacket." They made breakfast together as rain hammered against the windows. Matthew wrapped the food in extra layers of cloth and placed it inside a plastic bag to keep it dry. "Run fast," he told Henry, "and if it gets too bad, you come straight home. Don't worry about delivering it." "I'll be fine." Henry pulled on his jacket and grabbed the package. The moment he stepped outside, the rain soaked through his clothes. It was brutal, relentless cold. His shoes splashed through puddles that seemed to appear out of nowhere. By the time he reached Mrs. Charlotte's porch, he was drenched, completely shivering, but still holding the package carefully above his head. He climbed the steps and raised his hand to knock. The door flew open before his knuckles touched wood. Mrs. Charlotte stood there, her eyes wide with alarm. "Henry, good God, child, get in here right now." "I can't. I'll drip all over your—" She grabbed his arm and pulled him inside. "I don't care about the floor. You're freezing." For the first time ever, Henry crossed the threshold into Mrs. Charlotte's house. He'd imagined what it might look like inside. Maybe nice furniture, maybe some family photos. But this was overwhelming. The foyer alone was bigger than his entire living room. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, casting rainbow patterns on the walls. Oil paintings in gilded frames lined the hallway, faces of people he didn't recognize, landscapes of places he'd never been. Antique furniture sat in perfect arrangement, the kind you saw in museums, not homes. But there was something wrong about it all. Despite the luxury, despite the obvious expense, the house felt hollow, empty, like a museum after closing time. Mrs. Charlotte hurried him down the hall into a sitting room where a fireplace crackled with warmth. She grabbed a thick blanket from the sofa and wrapped it around his shoulders. "Sit. Don't move." She disappeared for a moment and returned with a towel. "What were you thinking walking through that storm?" "You were waiting for breakfast." Henry said it like it was obvious, like there was no other option. Something in Mrs. Charlotte's face crumpled. She returned carrying a silver tray with a porcelain teapot and 2 matching cups. Steam rose from the spout, carrying a familiar scent. "Mint tea," Henry said, surprised. "That's Dad's favorite." Mrs. Charlotte's hand trembled as she poured. "Is it?" "Yeah. He drinks it every single night. Says it helps him sleep." Henry accepted the cup carefully. "He's had trouble sleeping lately. Bad headaches." The cup in Mrs. Charlotte's hand rattled against the saucer. "What kind of headaches?" "He doesn't really talk about it, but sometimes I hear him at night. He wakes up breathing really hard, like he had a nightmare. And sometimes during the day, he just stops and stares at nothing, like he's remembering something." Mrs. Charlotte set her cup down before she dropped it. "Henry, can I ask you something about your father?" "Sure. How old is he?" 35. "And has he always lived here? In this city?" Henry thought about this. "I don't know, actually. He doesn't talk about when he was young. He says the past doesn't matter as much as what we do right now." "Does he have any family, parents, siblings?" "No. He said it's just been us for as long as I can remember. My mom died when I was a baby, and Dad raised me alone." Henry tilted his head, studying her. "Why are you asking all these questions?" Mrs. Charlotte looked at him for a long moment, her expression impossible to read. "I'm just curious about the man who raised such a thoughtful son." She stood up and walked to a small desk in the corner. She pulled out a thick white envelope and returned to Henry. "I want you to give this to your father." "What is it?" "Money. For bus fare. It's getting cold, and I don't want him walking to work in this weather. A man who works as hard as he does deserves a little comfort." Henry stared at the envelope. It was heavy. Too heavy for just bus fare. "Mrs. Charlotte, I don't think." "Please." Her voice was firm. "Do this for me. Tell him it's from someone who appreciates everything he's taught his son about kindness." That evening, when Matthew came home from his day shift, Henry was waiting at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of him. "What's that?" Matthew asked, already sensing something was off. "Mrs. Charlotte gave it to me. She said it's for bus fare because the weather's getting cold." Matthew picked up the envelope. The moment he felt the weight, his jaw tightened. He opened it. Cash. A lot of cash. Far more than any reasonable person would give for bus fare. His expression hardened in a way Henry rarely saw. "Did she say anything else?" "Just that you work hard and deserve comfort." Matthew closed the envelope carefully, his movements controlled, deliberate. Then he knelt down in front of his son, placing his hands on Henry's shoulders. "Listen to me very carefully, Henry. What we do bringing Mrs. Charlotte breakfast, helping people who need it, we don't do it for rewards. We don't do it for money. We do it because it's right. Do you understand? Yes, but she wanted to. I know what she wanted, and I appreciate the thought, but we don't take money from strangers, son. We especially don't take money from elderly people who might not be thinking clearly." His voice softened. "Tomorrow morning, I'm going with you to return this. And I'm going to thank Mrs. Charlotte personally for her kindness, but I'm going to explain that we can't accept it." Henry nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad." Matthew pulled his son into a hug. "You did the right thing by bringing this straight to me. I'm proud of you." But as Matthew held his son, his mind was racing. Something felt wrong about this whole situation. The questions Henry had mentioned, the excessive money, the sudden interest in their lives. His head began to throb again. The rain had stopped by the next morning, but the streets were still slick and gray. Matthew woke before the alarm, anxiety gnawing at his gut. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, changing in ways he didn't understand. He made breakfast with Henry in their usual silence, but his movements were mechanical, distracted. His mind kept circling back to that envelope, to the questions Mrs. Charlotte had asked his son. Why does she want to know about me? Why now, after all these months of Henry bringing her breakfast? Dad, you're burning the eggs! Matthew snapped back to attention. Smoke was rising from the pan. He quickly turned off the heat and scraped the eggs onto a plate. They were darker than usual, but still edible. Sorry, son. Got distracted. Henry watched him carefully. Are you mad at Mrs. Charlotte? No, not mad. Just cautious. Matthew wrapped the breakfast with more force than necessary. When someone offers you something that seems too generous, you have to ask yourself why. Maybe she's just nice. Maybe. But nice people can still have complicated reasons for doing things. Matthew grabbed the envelope from the counter. Let's go, both of us. They walked together through the quiet morning streets. The neighborhood looked different in the aftermath of the storm cleaner, somehow washed free of dust, but also stripped of color. Everything was shades of gray. As they approached Mrs. Charlotte's house, Matthew noticed things he'd never paid attention to before. The house was clearly expensive, well-maintained despite its aged appearance. The kind of place that didn't belong in this neighborhood. The kind of place that required money to maintain. Who is this woman really Mrs.? Charlotte was already on the porch, but today she wasn't sitting. She was standing gripping the railing, watching them approach, with an intensity that made Matthew's instincts fire warning signals. When her eyes landed on him, not Henry, but him, she went completely still. Matthew climbed the steps with Henry beside him. Up close, he could see that Mrs. Charlotte looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling on the railing. Mrs. Charlotte, Matthew said evenly. I'm Matthew, Henry's father. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. Her eyes were scanning his face like she was searching for something. It's good to finally meet you. Likewise. Henry speaks very highly of you. Matthew pulled the envelope from his jacket. But I'm afraid I can't accept this. Mrs. Charlotte didn't reach for it. It's just bus fare. Ma'am, with respect, this is far more than bus fare. And while I appreciate the gesture, my son and I don't accept money from people we deliver breakfast to. That's not why we do it. I know why you do it. Her voice cracked slightly. Your son told me. Because kindness is an obligation, not a favor. Because it's about showing up every day, being thoughtful, paying attention to what people need. Matthew blinked, surprised to hear his own words reflected back at him. Mrs. Charlotte's eyes were glistening now. You taught him that. You taught him to be kind in a world that doesn't always reward kindness. You taught him to show up, to be consistent, to care about details like how much pepper an old woman prefers on her eggs. A tear slipped down her cheek. Do you know what a rare gift that is? Teaching a child to have a good heart. Matthew didn't know what to say. The woman's emotion seemed outsized, inappropriate for the situation. Henry tugged on his father's sleeve. Dad, Mrs. Charlotte's crying. I see that, son. Matthew kept his voice gentle but firm. Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need us to call someone? No, She wiped her eyes quickly. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make this uncomfortable. Please just keep the money. Use it however you want. Think of it as a thank you from someone who hasn't had much to be thankful for in a very long time. Matthew studied her face, the desperation there, the loneliness, the something else he couldn't quite name. Against his better judgment, he felt his resolve softening. Mrs. Charlotte, if you're struggling or need help with something, there are better ways. I'm not struggling. She laughed, but it was hollow. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What I don't have is... She stopped herself, glancing at Henry. What I don't have is the kind of goodness you've built in your home, the kind of life where a father and son wake up before dawn to make breakfast for a lonely old woman. That's worth more than anything I could ever give you. The words hit Matthew harder than he expected. There was truth in them, raw and painful. Still, he said quietly, we can't take this, but I'll make you a deal. If you ever need anything, groceries carried, light bulbs, changed, yard work done, you call me. Henry can give you my number. That's how we can help. Fair Mrs. Charlotte looked at him for a long moment, and something in her expression shifted, softened. You're a good man, Matthew. I try to be. Does it come naturally, being good? The question caught him off guard. I don't know. I just know that I want my son to grow up knowing that what we do matters, that how we treat people matters, that we don't get to choose our circumstances, but we do get to choose our actions. Mrs. Charlotte's hand flew to her mouth. Fresh tears spilled over. I'm sorry. Excuse me. She turned and rushed inside the door, closing behind her with a soft click. Matthew and Henry stood on the porch in confused silence. Dad, what just happened? Matthew shook his head slowly. I have no idea, son. Inside the house, Mrs. Charlotte leaned against the closed door, her whole body shaking. She pressed her fist against her mouth to stop the sob that wanted to escape. Those words, those exact words. 26 years ago, she'd asked her adopted son's biological mother, the woman who'd given him up, why she was giving him up if she loved him. The woman had said, I can't choose my circumstances, but I can choose my actions, and my action is to give him a life I can't provide. Charlotte had adopted that little boy 3 days later. She'd held him and promised him she'd love him enough for 2 mothers. She'd promised him that what he did would matter, that how he treated people would matter, that she'd teach him to be good. And now, standing in her hallway, listening to Matthew's words echo in her mind, she knew. She knew with a certainty that went beyond logic, beyond probability. That was her son, standing on her porch, teaching his own child the lessons she'd begun to teach him before he was stolen away. Her phone was in her hand before she consciously decided to grab it. She dialed Detective Morrison with shaking fingers. Charlotte, did you get the information? Just finished compiling it. Are you sitting down? Tell me. Matthew Jenkins, age 35. Birth certificate shows he was born in County General Hospital to a mother named Sarah Jenkins, deceased when Matthew was 4 months old. But Charlotte, the birth certificate has irregularities. The registration was filed 2 years late. The mother's signature looks forged. Charlotte's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. What else? He spent his childhood bouncing between foster homes. No adoption records, no permanent placement. He aged out of the system at 18, worked 3 jobs to put himself through community college, and has been raising Henry alone since the boy's mother, a woman named Lisa Chen, died in childbirth. Any medical records distinguishing marks? Medical records are sealed from his childhood, but I pulled what I could from his adult records. Charlotte. He has a crescent-shaped scar on his right shoulder blade, documented in a physical exam from 10 years ago. The phone slipped from Charlotte's fingers. A crescent-shaped scar. Her son had fallen when he was 3, cutting his shoulder on a decorative moon ornament in the garden. She'd held him while the doctor stitched it up. She'd kissed that scar every night before bed. Charlotte. Are you there, Charlotte? She picked up the phone with numb fingers. Get the DNA authorization forms ready. I need to see him again. Today. Now. Charlotte, you can't just... Watch me. She hung up and walked to her office in a daze. Her mind was spinning, calculating, planning. She'd spent 25 years building a financial empire for one purpose, to have the resources to find her son. She'd cultivated connections, bought influence, positioned herself to move heaven and earth if necessary. If Matthew was her son, and every fiber of her being screamed that he was, then she would prove it. Legally, definitively, irrefutably, and nothing would stop her. Not anymore. Matthew woke the next morning with the same persistent headache, but this time it was accompanied by a sense of dread he couldn't explain. Something felt wrong. Off. Like the air pressure had changed before a storm. Henry was already in the kitchen when Matthew came down. Dad, can we bring extra toast today? I was thinking Mrs. Charlotte might like... A sound cut through the quiet morning. Distant at first, then growing louder. Sirens. Multiple sirens from different directions, all converging. Matthew moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. His blood ran cold. The street was being blocked off. Police cars at both ends, officers getting out, setting up barriers. And behind them, emerging through the early morning mist, like something from a dream or a nightmare, was a line of black limousines. Not 1, not 5, 50, maybe more. Dad. Henry's voice was small. What's happening? Matthew couldn't answer. He couldn't move. He could only watch as the limousines parked in perfect formation, filling the entire street. Doors opened in synchronized movements. Men in dark suits security clearly stepped out and took positions. Neighbors were coming out of their houses, now confused, frightened. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door was on her phone. Mr. Patterson was arguing with a police officer. And then the center limousine's door opened. Mrs. Charlotte stepped out. But this wasn't the frail old woman who sat in a rocking chair. This woman stood straight, commanding, dressed in an elegant black suit that probably cost more than Matthew's car. Her white hair was styled professionally. She wore jewelry that caught the rising sun and threw it back in diamond flashes. Behind her, a man in an expensive suit leaned in, speaking quickly. She nodded once and he stepped back. She began walking toward Matthew's house. Dad, I don't understand. Henry pressed against his father's side. "Why is Mrs. Charlotte? Why are there so many cars?" Matthew's hands were shaking. "I don't know, son. I don't know." The knock on the door was firm, professional. Matthew opened it to find not Mrs. Charlotte, but a man in a dark suit with an earpiece. "Mr. Matthew Jenkins." "Yes." "Mrs. Charlotte Harrington requests your presence. Immediately." "Mrs. Wade Harrington." The name hit Matthew like a physical blow. Everyone knew that name. Harrington Industries, Harrington Financial, one of the wealthiest families in the country. There must be some mistake. "No mistake, sir. Please come with me." "I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me what's happening." The security officer's expression didn't change. "Mrs. Harrington will explain everything. She's requested this conversation happen outside with witnesses present. Please, Mr. Jenkins. She's been waiting 25 years for this moment. Don't make her wait longer." 25 years, Matthew's head was spinning. The headache was back worse than ever, accompanied by those flashes of memory that weren't quite memories. Lavender, a woman's kind face, darkness, sirens. "Henry, stay inside." "But Dad?" "Stay inside." Matthew's voice left no room for argument. He stepped out onto his porch. The entire neighborhood was watching now. Cameras were appearing, news vans somehow already alerted pulling up at the barricades, reporters shouting questions that Matthew couldn't process. Mrs. Charlotte, Mrs. Harrington, stood in the middle of the street, perfectly composed despite the tears streaming down her face. "Matthew," she said, her voice somehow carrying clearly despite the distance. "I know this is frightening. I know this makes no sense, but I need you to listen to me very carefully." "Who are you?" Matthew heard himself ask. "Who are you really?" "My name is Charlotte Harrington. I own Harrington Industries. But more importantly," her voice broke, "more importantly, I am a mother who had her child stolen from her 25 years ago." The world tilted. "What?" 25 years ago, I adopted a baby boy. I loved him with everything I had. He was smart, kind, curious. He loved mint tea before bed. He had nightmares sometimes, and I would hold him until he felt safe." She took a step closer. "When he was 4 years old, we went to Butterfly Park. I turned my back for 30 seconds. 30 seconds. And when I turned back, he was gone." Matthew couldn't breathe. "The police investigated. We spent millions on private detectives. I've been searching for 25 years. Never gave up. Never stopped. And 3 days ago, my investigator found something." She pulled out a folder and opened it. Even from a distance, Matthew could see what it contained: photos, documents, records. "You were registered 2 years late, Matthew. Your birth certificate has irregularities. You have a crescent-shaped scar on your right shoulder, a scar my son got when he fell against a garden ornament when he was 3. You love mint tea. You get headaches and flashes of memories you can't explain." Her voice rose. "You were stolen from me. Someone took you, falsified your records, and raised you as someone else." "No." The word came out weak. "No, that's insane. My mother was Sarah Jenkins. She died when I was a baby." "Sarah Jenkins never existed. The signature on your birth certificate is a forgery. I have the forensic analysis." Charlotte held up another document. "I have investigators who traced every thread of your life, every missing piece, every gap in the records." Matthew's legs felt weak. "This is crazy." "You're crazy." "I'm not. I can't be." "You have a birthmark on your left hip shaped like a comma. You're allergic to strawberries. When you were 3, you had a speech impediment, a slight lisp that corrected itself before you turned 4. Charlotte's eyes bored into his. "How do I know these things, Matthew? How could I possibly know such specific, intimate details about your body unless I was there? Unless I was the one who kissed those birthmarks? Unless I was the one who held you through your first allergic reaction? Unless I was your mother?" The world was spinning now. Those flashes in his head were getting stronger, more vivid. A garden with butterflies, big, colorful butterflies. A woman in a yellow sundress smiling at him. The smell of lavender, her voice singing, "Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Mama's gonna sing you a lullaby." "No." Matthew grabbed his head. "No, these aren't real memories. They can't be." "They are real." Charlotte was closer now, her voice gentle despite her tears. "You were too young to fully remember, but the memories are there, buried. Your mind kept them because I loved you, because love leaves marks even when everything else is stolen." "Prove it." Matthew forced the words out. "If this is real, prove it. Scientifically. Legally. Prove it." Charlotte nodded to the man behind her. He stepped forward with a briefcase, opened it, and pulled out several official-looking documents and a DNA testing kit. "I've had DNA authorization forms prepared," Charlotte said. "We can do the test right now, right here, with witnesses, lawyers, police present. When the results come back in 72 hours, we'll know for certain." Matthew stared at the testing kit. His whole life felt like it was balanced on the edge of a cliff. If he took this test and it came back negative, this woman would leave him alone, and his life would return to normal. If it came back positive, everything he thought he knew about himself was a lie. "Mr. Jenkins," one of the suited men stepped forward. "I'm Howard Chen, Mrs. Harrington's attorney. I want to assure you that regardless of the outcome, you have legal rights. You're an adult. No one can force you into any situation. This is simply about establishing truth." Matthew looked at Charlotte, this woman who'd shown up with 50 limousines and upended his entire world before 7 a.m. But he also saw the raw desperation in her eyes, the hope and terror warring there. This wasn't some rich woman's game. This was a mother who'd spent 25 years searching for her child. And those memories in his head, those flashes that felt more real than any memory should. "If I do this," Matthew said slowly, "and if it's positive, then what? Then we talk," Charlotte said simply. "We figure it out, together. I'm not here to take anything from you, Matthew. I'm not here to disrupt your life or take you away from your son. I'm here because—" Her voice shattered. "I'm here because I've dreamed of finding you for 25 years, and I just want to know my child is alive and safe and happy." Matthew looked back at his house where Henry was surely watching from the window, terrified and confused. "What kind of example do I set if I run from the truth?" "Okay," he said. "Let's do the test." The next 72 hours were a media firestorm. News vans camped outside Matthew's house. Reporters shouted questions every time he left for work. His phone rang constantly with interview requests, book deal offers, movie rights inquiries. He ignored all of it. Charlotte had disappeared after the test, returning to whatever mansion she lived in, leaving Matthew to process everything in relative peace, if peace was the right word for the chaos consuming his mind. The headaches were constant now. The memories, if they were memories, were getting stronger. He remembered butterflies. So many butterflies. He remembered a garden with a fountain. He remembered a woman singing in a language he didn't recognize. He remembered feeling safe, loved, cherished. And then he remembered darkness, fear, someone carrying him, being told to be quiet, to not cry, or something bad would happen. He'd wake up in the middle of the night gasping, Henry shaking his shoulder asking if he was okay. He wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. On the third day, Howard Chen called. "The results are in. Mrs. Harrington would like to share them with you in person. Can you come to her residence?" Matthew agreed because what else could he do? He arranged for Mrs. Rodriguez to watch Henry, and he took a taxi to the address Chen provided. The house mansion really was massive, set back from the street behind iron gates and manicured gardens. Charlotte met him at the door herself. She looked small again, fragile. The powerful woman from 3 days ago had disappeared, leaving behind someone who looked like she might shatter at any moment. "Come in," she whispered. They sat in a library lined with books no one would ever read. Chen was there along with a doctor Matthew didn't recognize and a woman introduced as a genetic counselor. Charlotte held an envelope in shaking hands. "I already know what it says," she told Matthew. "I opened it an hour ago. But I wanted to wait for you to be here before we make it official. Just tell me." She handed him the envelope. Matthew opened it, his hand surprisingly steady. He scanned the technical jargon, the numbers, and percentages until he found the conclusion: probability of maternity, 99.97%. The paper slipped from his fingers. "You're my son." Charlotte's voice was barely audible. "You're my baby, my Matthew. You came back to me." And Matthew, who'd spent his entire adult life being strong, being steady, being the rock his son needed, collapsed to his knees and wept. 3 days after the DNA results, Matthew still hadn't moved into the mansion. Charlotte had offered, of course she had, an entire wing of the house, fully furnished, top schools for Henry financial security, beyond anything he could provide, working 2 jobs. He'd said no. Now he sat in Charlotte's library, the same room where his world had shattered, and tried to explain why to a woman who'd spent 25 years searching for him. "I don't understand," Charlotte said, and for the first time since this began, there was steel in her voice. "I'm offering you everything. A real home, security, education for Henry, the life you should have had. Why are you refusing?" "Because I don't know you." Matthew's voice was harder than he intended. You're not my mother. You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA. I raised you for 4 years. And then you lost me." The words came out cruel, sharp as knives. "Where were you when I was being shuffled from one foster home to another? Where were you when I was sleeping in my car at 19, trying to save enough money for community college? Where were you when Henry's mother died and I was 26 years old, terrified, holding a newborn baby with no idea how to be a parent?" Charlotte's face went pale. "I was looking for you. Every single day I was looking in the wrong places, clearly." Matthew stood up, pacing. "Do you know what it's like growing up without anyone being the kid no one wanted to keep, working 3 jobs just to survive? I built a life from nothing, Charlotte, from nothing. And now you show up with your limousines and your lawyers and your money, acting like you can just fix everything, like you can erase 25 years of—" He stopped, breathing hard. Charlotte sat perfectly still, tears running down her face, but she didn't make a sound. "I'm sorry," Matthew said, quieter now. "That was unfair." "No." Her voice was steady despite the tears. "It wasn't. You're right. I failed you. I turned my back for 30 seconds and I failed you. Nothing I do can change that." "It's not about blame." "Then what is it about?" Matthew sat back down, suddenly exhausted. "It's about the fact that I don't fit into your world. I never will. I'm a 35-year-old man who works in insurance and cleans hospitals at night. My son is growing up in a 2-bedroom house where we make breakfast at 5:30 a.m. and walk to save bus fare. That's who we are. And your world, this world," he gestured at the mansion around them, "it would swallow us whole. I'm not asking you to change who you are. Yes, you are. Just by being here, you're asking that. Every time Henry sees this house, every time he realizes what we could have, it changes him. It changes how he sees me, how he sees his life. And I won't," his voice cracked. "I won't let my son grow up feeling like what I've given him isn't enough." Silence fell between them, heavy and painful. Finally, Charlotte spoke. "Can I show you something?" She stood and walked to a wall of filing cabinets. She opened the first drawer and pulled out a thick folder, then another and another, stack after stack after stack, until the desk was covered. "These are investigation reports," she said quietly. "Every lead, every false alarm, every dead end over 25 years. I hired 73 different private investigators. I spent over $40 million searching for you. I learned 6 languages because there were reports you might have been trafficked internationally. I built a financial empire specifically to have the resources and connections to find you." She opened one of the folders. Inside were photos of other boys, black boys around the right age. Hundreds of them. Every single one of these children I thought might be you. I tracked them down, confirmed they weren't, and then I helped them anyway. Paid for their education, got them out of abusive situations, found their real families. She looked up at Matthew. "I've reunited 47 children with their families over the years. Not because it would lead me to you, but because while I was looking, I kept finding other stolen children, and I couldn't just walk away." Matthew stared at the folders, speechless. "You say I wasn't there," Charlotte continued. "And you're right. I wasn't there for your childhood, for your struggles, for the moment you became a father. But I never stopped looking. I never stopped hoping. And I never stopped trying to make the world better while I searched." She closed the folder. "I don't expect that to fix anything. I know it doesn't give you back what was stolen. I'm just asking you to understand that losing you destroyed me, and everything I've done since has been an attempt to find you again." Matthew felt something break open in his chest. "Charlotte, and now that I've found you, I'm not trying to replace your life. I'm not trying to buy you or change you or make you into something you're not." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I just want to know you. I want to watch you drink your mint tea and learn why you taught your son that kindness is an obligation. I want to understand the man you became without me, because even though I wasn't there, you turned into someone extraordinary." Before Matthew could respond, there was a knock on the library door. A man in a white coat entered the doctor from the DNA results meeting. "Mrs. Harrington, I apologize for interrupting, but we need to discuss—" "Not now, Dr. Palmer." "Charlotte, this can't wait." Something in his tone made Matthew's instincts fire. He looked between the doctor and Charlotte, saw the way she'd gone rigid, the way her hands were suddenly gripping the desk. "What's going on?" Matthew asked. "Nothing that concerns," Charlotte started. "She's sick, doctor," Palmer said bluntly. "And she's refusing treatment." The room went cold. "What?" Charlotte glared at the doctor. I told you this was privileged. You're her son. You're her next of kin. You have a right to know. Dr. Palmer turned to Matthew. Your mother has a brain tumor, glioblastoma stage 4. It's aggressive and advanced. She's been symptomatic for months, the trembling hands, the headaches, but she refused to do anything about it until the DNA results were confirmed. Matthew couldn't process the words. How bad? Without treatment days, maybe a week. With aggressive treatment surgery, radiation chemotherapy, we might buy months, maybe a year. Then why isn't she getting treatment? Dr. Palmer looked at Charlotte, who was staring at the floor. Because the tumor is in a location that makes surgery extremely risky. There's a 70% chance the operation would result in complete memory loss. She would survive, but she wouldn't remember anything. Not her life. Not her work. He paused. Not you. Matthew felt like he'd been punched. So you're just giving up. You found me, and now you're going to die. I'm not giving up. Charlotte's voice was quiet, but firm. I'm making a choice. I spent 25 years not knowing if you were alive or dead. Now I know. I've spoken to you. I've learned about your life, your son, the man you've become. And if I only have a few days left, I'd rather spend them with my memories intact, knowing who you are, than live for months as a blank slate who doesn't even recognize her own child. That's insane. That's love. Charlotte finally looked up at him. I already lost you once. I won't lose you again, not even to my own failing memory. I'd rather die knowing you than live forgetting you. Matthew turned to Dr. Palmer. What if she has the surgery? What are the chances she remembers anything at all? Slim. Very slim. The location of the tumor means we'd have to remove or damage tissue associated with long-term memory formation and retention. She might retain some basic functions, but complex memories, emotional connections, recognition of loved ones. Extremely unlikely. But she'd be alive. Physically, yes. But she wouldn't be her. Matthew looked at Charlotte, this woman he'd known for less than a week, but who carried 25 years of love for him in her heart. I won't make the decision for you, she said softly, but I'm asking you to respect mine. I just found you, Matthew whispered. I'm not ready to lose you again. Then don't waste what time we have. Charlotte stood and crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. Stay, please. Not forever if you don't want to, but stay for a few days. Let me know my son. Let me meet my grandson properly. Let me have this one small piece of the life that was stolen from us. Matthew thought about Henry, about the example he was setting, about what it meant to honor someone's choices, even when they broke your heart. Okay, he said, we'll stay. But Charlotte, he squeezed her hands. I'm not ready to give up on you yet. Can we at least talk about the options, all of them? Charlotte smiled, sad and grateful. We can talk. Henry sat on the edge of the enormous bed in the guest room, his legs swinging. Everything here was too big, too fancy, too much. The bathroom had heated floors. The closet was bigger than his bedroom at home. There were 3 different kinds of pillows on the bed. It felt wrong. His dad sat next to him, looking tired in a way Henry had never seen before. Is Mrs. Charlotte really dying? Henry asked quietly. Matthew closed his eyes. Yes. Because of the brain tumor? Yes. And if she has surgery, she might live but forget everything. That's what the doctors say. Henry processed this with his usual seriousness. That's not fair. No, it's not. We just found her. Or she found us. Or I don't understand how this works. Henry's voice cracked. Why does everything good have to have something bad attached to it? Matthew pulled his son close. I don't know, buddy. I really don't. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Henry said, What are you going to do? I don't know that either. It's not my decision. It's hers. But you're her son. Doesn't that mean you should help her decide? Matthew looked at his own son, 9 years old, and already understanding complicated truths about love and responsibility. What do you think I should do? Henry thought carefully. I think you should ask yourself what you'd want if it was me. If I was sick and might forget you, what would you want me to do? The question hit Matthew like a freight train. I'd want you to live, no matter what. Even if I didn't know who you were, even then, because you'd still be alive. And maybe someday I could help you remember, or we could make new memories. Henry nodded slowly. Then maybe that's what Mrs. Charlotte needs too. Someone who won't give up on her even if she forgets. At 3 a.m., Matthew found Charlotte in the library, surrounded by photo albums. Can't sleep either, she asked. No. Matthew sat down across from her. What are you looking at? Pictures of you, from when you were little. She turned an album toward him. "This was your second birthday. You refused to eat the cake because it had strawberries on it. We didn't know about the allergy yet." Matthew looked at the photo. A toddler version of himself, chubby-cheeked and laughing, pushing away a plate. "And this," Charlotte flipped the page. "This was the first day you called me Mama. You were 2.5. We were in the garden looking at butterflies. You pointed at one and said, 'Mama, fly.' I cried for an hour." Matthew stared at the photos, these snapshots of a life he couldn't remember. "Charlotte, I need to ask you something. Anything. If you have the surgery and you forget everything, would you want to know? Would you want us to tell you who you were, who we were?" Charlotte was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. That's the terrifying part. I might wake up as someone completely different. Someone who doesn't want to know about a son she doesn't remember. Someone who doesn't understand why this strange man is claiming to be her child. Or you might wake up wanting to understand, wanting to know why your heart feels like something's missing." She looked at him sharply. "Do you believe that love leaves marks even memory can't erase?" "I don't know," Matthew admitted. "But I know that for 25 years I had dreams about butterflies and gardens and someone singing to me in a language I didn't recognize. I know that I've always loved mint tea, even though I have no idea where that came from. I know that the first time I saw you, really saw you, not just the old woman on the porch, but you. Something in my chest recognized you before my brain did." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "Henry asked me earlier if he could call me Grandma. I told him yes. And then I went into the bathroom and sobbed because I've been dreaming of having a grandchild for so long, and now I have one, and I might not even remember him." "Then have the surgery," Matthew said firmly. "Live. Give us a chance to help you remember, or to build something new if you can't. But don't give up, please. I just found you. Henry just found you. Don't ask us to say goodbye this fast. But if I forget you, then we'll remind you. Every single day. We'll tell you stories. We'll show you pictures. We'll bring you breakfast at 5:30 in the morning until the smell of eggs and toast triggers something deep in your brain." Matthew took her hands. "You spent 25 years searching for me. Let me spend however long it takes searching for you." Charlotte stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "You would do that, even after everything, even though you said you don't know me." "I'm starting to." Matthew squeezed her hands. "And what I'm learning is that you're stubborn and determined, and you don't give up on the people you love. Those are traits I recognize. Those are traits I taught my son. Maybe I learned them from you first." Charlotte laughed through her tears. "You were 4 years old. You couldn't have." "Memory isn't just in the brain, Charlotte. It's in the body, in the heart, in the patterns we repeat without knowing why. You taught me to love fiercely, to never stop searching for what matters, to show up every single day, even when it's hard." He smiled sadly. "I just didn't know I learned it from you until now." Charlotte pulled him into a hug, the first real embrace they'd shared, and held on like he might disappear again if she let go. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll have the surgery." 2 days later, Charlotte was being prepped for surgery. The best neurosurgical team money could buy had been assembled. The hospital's private wing was locked down with security. Every precaution was being taken, but none of it could guarantee that Charlotte would wake up still knowing who she was. Matthew sat with her in pre-op, holding her hand. Henry was there too, sitting on the other side of the bed, looking small and scared. "I want you both to know something," Charlotte said. Her voice was calm, clear. "If I wake up and I don't remember you, I want you to tell me everything. Don't hide it. Don't protect me from the truth. Tell me about the life I had, the son I lost, the grandson I found. Even if I don't remember, I want to know." "We will," Matthew promised. "And Henry," Charlotte looked at the boy, her eyes soft. "You keep being kind, sweetheart. You keep bringing people breakfast and showing up when you don't have to. That gift you have, that beautiful heart, don't ever lose it." "I won't, Grandma." Henry's voice was thick with tears. The surgical team entered. It was time. Charlotte squeezed Matthew's hand one last time. "Thank you for letting me find you. Thank you for never giving up." They wheeled her away, and Matthew was left standing in an empty room with his son waiting to find out if the woman who'd searched for him for 25 years would remember that the search was over. The surgery took 11 hours. Matthew didn't leave the hospital. He sat in the private waiting room, drinking terrible coffee, while Henry alternated between sleeping on the couch and asking questions no one could answer. Reporters had somehow found out where they were. News vans lined the street outside. This had become a national story, the billionaire who found her long-lost son only to potentially lose herself trying to survive. Matthew ignored all of it. The only thing that mattered was the door at the end of the hallway, the one the doctors would eventually walk through with news. At hour 9, Henry climbed into his lap. "Dad, I'm scared." "Me too, buddy." "What if she doesn't remember us?" "Then we remind her." "But what if she doesn't want to remember?" Matthew didn't have an answer for that. At hour 11, the door opened. Dr. Palmer walked out, still in his surgical scrubs, looking exhausted but relieved. "She's alive," he said immediately. "The surgery went as well as we could have hoped. We got the tumor. All of it." Matthew stood, his legs shaky. "And her memory." Dr. Palmer's expression sobered. "We won't know for certain until she wakes up. But I'll be honest with you, we had to remove and cauterize significant tissue in the temporal and frontal lobes. The damage is extensive. The likelihood that she retains complex memories is extremely low, but not impossible. Nothing's impossible. The brain is remarkable. Sometimes it finds ways to reroute to compensate, but I don't want you to get your hopes up." "When can we see her?" "She's in recovery now. It'll be a few hours before she's conscious. I'll let you know when you can go in." Those few hours felt like days. Finally, a nurse came to get them. "She's waking up. You can see her, but please keep it brief. She's very weak." Matthew and Henry followed the nurse down the sterile hallway to the ICU. Through the window, Matthew could see Charlotte in the bed, surrounded by machines tubes running from her arms, an oxygen mask over her face. She looked so small, so fragile. They entered quietly. The machines beeped in steady rhythm. Charlotte's eyes were closed, but her breathing was even. Matthew pulled a chair close to the bed and took her hand. It was warm, alive. "Charlotte," he said softly, "can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered, opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually clearing. She looked at him, really looked at him, and Matthew's heart sank. There was no recognition in her eyes, no spark of memory, just confusion and exhaustion. "Who?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from intubation. "Who are you?" Matthew felt like he'd been stabbed. "It's Matthew. I'm your son." Charlotte stared at him blankly. I don't have a son." Beside him, Henry made a small, wounded sound. Matthew squeezed Charlotte's hand, fighting back tears. "You do. You had a son who was taken from you 25 years ago, and you spent your whole life searching for him. For me." "I don't remember that." Her voice was flat, confused. "I don't remember any of that. I'm sorry, She closed her eyes again, exhausted. Dr. Palmer appeared at the door. "Mr. Jenkins, you should let her rest. The memory issues might improve in the coming days, or they might not. Right now, she just needs to heal." Matthew nodded numbly. He stood still, holding Charlotte's hand. "I'll come back," he told her, sleeping form. "Every day, and I'll tell you everything. I promise." Henry tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, she doesn't know us." "Not yet," Matthew said, his voice breaking. "But she will. Somehow she will." He led his son out of the room, back into the hallway, back into a world where the woman who'd found him had lost herself trying to survive, but he'd meant what he said. He would come back. Every single day. Just like she'd never stop searching for him. Matthew didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table in Charlotte's mansion, their temporary home that felt less temporary every day, staring at his phone, reading every medical article about post-surgical memory loss he could find. The research wasn't encouraging. Most patients never recovered complex memories. Some regained basic functions. Others remained in a permanent state of confusion about their past. But there were outliers. Cases where patients recovered fragments, stories of unexpected triggers, a song, a smell, a photograph that unlocked something the surgery couldn't destroy. "Dad," Matthew looked up. Henry stood in the doorway in his pajamas, holding something wrapped in a cloth napkin. "Buddy, it's 4 a.m. What are you doing up?" Henry came closer. "I had an idea. You're going to say no because I'm breaking the rules, but I think it's important." "What kind of idea?" Henry set the bundle on the table. "You said smell and memory are connected. You said that's why you always loved mint tea, even though you didn't know why. And Grandma misses Charlotte. She recognized the smell of our breakfast. She said it made her happy, even before she knew why." Matthew stared at the bundle. "Is that breakfast? The same kind we always made. Eggs, toast, a little salt, barely any pepper. I made it myself." Henry's voice was determined. "The nurses said she can have soft foods today. What if we bring this to her? What if the smell helps her remember?" "Henry," the doctor said. "The doctor said it's unlikely she'll remember." They didn't say impossible. Henry's eyes were fierce. She spent 25 years not giving up on you. We can't give up on her after one day. Matthew looked at his son, 9 years old, and already wiser than he had any right to be, and felt his heart crack open. You're right. He stood up. Let's go. The hospital was quiet at 5 a.m. They'd let Matthew keep his access badge to the ICU, though the nurses had made it clear they expected him to follow visiting hours. He ignored the disapproving looks and led Henry to Charlotte's room. She was awake, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. A nurse was checking her vitals. Mr. Jenkins, it's very early. I know, I'm sorry. We just need a few minutes. The nurse looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Matthew's face stopped her. She finished her check and left. Matthew and Henry approached the bed slowly. Charlotte's eyes shifted to them, curious but unrecognizing. Hello, she said politely. I'm sorry, do I know you? Every time she asked that question, it hurt, but Matthew kept his voice steady. We met yesterday. I'm Matthew. This is my son Henry. Oh, yes. But there was no real memory in her voice, just politeness. Henry stepped forward, holding the bundle. Mrs. Charlotte, ma'am, we brought you something. He carefully unwrapped the cloth. The smell hit immediately. Warm eggs, toasted bread butter, melting. Simple, ordinary, but powerfully evocative. Charlotte's nostrils flared. Her eyes widened slightly. Henry picked up the fork and carefully cut a small piece of egg. The nurse said you could have soft foods. We made this the same way we always do. Not too much pepper, just the way you like it. He held the fork toward her mouth. Charlotte stared at it, at him. Her breathing had changed, quickened slightly. She blinked rapidly. That smells familiar, Matthew asked quietly. I don't know, but her hand was trembling as she reached for the fork. I don't remember, but it feels like it should mean something. She took the bite. The moment the food touched her tongue, she went completely still. Matthew held his breath. Charlotte chewed slowly, her eyes distant, unfocused. A single tear slipped down her cheek. She swallowed. There's a little boy, in my mind. I can't see his face clearly, but he's bringing me something. On a plate. And her voice broke. I'm so grateful, so incredibly grateful because I'm lonely, and he makes me feel less alone. Henry's eyes widened. That's me. I brought you breakfast every morning for months. Charlotte looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. You did. Every single day. Dad taught me how. He said kindness is about showing up even when no one's watching. Something flickered in Charlotte's expression. She turned to Matthew. You taught him that? Yes. Why? Because... Matthew's throat tightened. Because I believe that how we treat people matters more than anything else. That we can't always choose our circumstances, but we can choose our actions. Charlotte's hand flew to her mouth. Fresh tears spilled over. Those words. I know those words. Someone said them to me. Long ago. Someone important. You did, Matthew said gently. You said them to me when I was 4 years old, or something like them. And somehow, even though I didn't remember you, I remembered that lesson. Charlotte was crying openly now, her whole body shaking. I don't understand. I don't remember you. I don't remember any of this. But it hurts. It hurts like losing something precious. Why does it hurt if I can't remember? Matthew moved closer, taking her hand. Because love leaves marks that go deeper than memory. Because for 25 years, you carried me in your heart even when you didn't know where I was. That kind of love doesn't just disappear because of surgery. Henry climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed. Grandma, he said softly. That's what you told me to call you. You said it made you happy. Grandma, Charlotte repeated, testing the word. She looked at Henry, at Matthew, at the simple breakfast that had triggered something ineffable. I have a son and a grandson. Yes. And I lost you. I lost my son for 25 years. Yes. And I found you again because... She looked at Henry. Because you brought me breakfast. Henry nodded. Every morning. Dad taught me to be kind, and you turned out to be his mom. It was like the universe was fixing something that got broken. Charlotte pulled Henry into a gentle hug, careful of the IV lines. Then she reached for Matthew. I still don't remember. Not really. Just feelings, impressions. But I believe you. I believe that I loved you, that I lost you, that finding you again was everything I lived for. That's enough, Matthew said, his voice thick with emotion. We can work with that. We'll tell you stories, show you pictures. We'll help you understand who you were, who we are, who we can be together. Charlotte held them both, this family she couldn't quite remember, but somehow recognized in the deepest part of herself. "The breakfast," she whispered. "Can you bring it again tomorrow?" "Every single day," Henry promised. "For as long as you want." And somehow, despite the surgery, despite the memory loss, despite every medical prediction that said this was impossible, Charlotte smiled, a real smile, the kind that came from somewhere memory couldn't touch. 1 year later, the house at the end of the street looked different. The peeling paint was gone, replaced with fresh cream-colored siding. The dead garden had been transformed into a riot of flowers, including dozens of butterfly-attracting plants. The porch, once lonely and bare, now held 2 rocking chairs. Matthew stood on that porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. "Dad," Henry's voice called from inside. "Grandma's asking for you." Matthew smiled and went inside. The house had been transformed into the headquarters of the Charlotte and Matthew Family Reunion Foundation. The first floor was offices. The second floor was living space Charlotte's suite, along with rooms for Matthew and Henry. Charlotte sat in the library, surrounded by case files. At 77, 1 year post-surgery, she still didn't remember everything. Probably never would. But she'd regained enough and built enough new memories that she knew who she was again. More importantly, she knew who she'd become. "Look at this one," she said, handing Matthew a file. 8-year-old girl missing from Portland for 3 years. We got a hit on the facial recognition database. Matthew scanned the file. "Strong lead." "Very strong. I'm sending a team today." She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "That's number 48, Matthew. 48 children reunited with their families because of this foundation." "Because of you," he corrected. "Because of us." She stood and hugged him, something she did frequently now, as if making up for lost time. "Because you taught your son to be kind, and that kindness brought you back to me, and now we're using everything we have to help others." Henry burst into the room. "Grandma, Mr. Patterson's here." Charlotte lit up. "Send him in." Mr. Patterson was the new neighbor, an elderly black man who'd moved in across the street 2 months ago. His wife had died recently, and he'd been struggling with loneliness and depression. He shuffled in looking better than he had when he first arrived. "Morning, Charlotte, Matthew." "Morning, Bill. Have you eaten?" Charlotte was already moving toward the kitchen. "Actually, that's why I'm here." Bill smiled. "Henry's been bringing me breakfast every morning for the past 2 months. I wanted to say thank you properly." Charlotte stopped, turned, and looked at Henry with pride radiating from every pore. "Has he now?" Henry shrugged, embarrassed. "It's not a big deal. I wake up early anyway, and Dad taught me. That kindness is an obligation, not a favor." Charlotte finished. She crossed to her grandson and kissed the top of his head. "You're continuing the legacy, sweetheart." "Well, I wanted to give you this." Bill handed Henry an envelope. "Just a little something to say thank you." Henry opened it and immediately tried to hand it back. "Mr. Patterson, I can't accept money for." "It's not money." Bill smiled. "It's a letter of recommendation. I'm a retired principal. I heard you're applying to that science academy, and I wanted to help." Henry's eyes widened. "Really? Really? A kid who brings an old man breakfast every day without being asked. That's the kind of student any school would be lucky to have." After Bill left, Charlotte gathered Matthew and Henry in the garden. The afternoon sun was warm, and butterflies danced among the flowers, monarchs, mostly Charlotte's favorites. "I want to show you both something," she said. She led them to a section of the garden where a new bronze plaque had been installed. It read, "In memory of what was lost, in celebration of what was found. This garden is dedicated to all families torn apart by circumstance, and to the hope that love, persistence, and kindness can bring healing." Established by Charlotte Harrington, Matthew Jenkins, and Henry Jenkins, kindness is not a favor. It is an obligation we owe to the world. Below the plaque was a bench. Charlotte sat down, patting the spaces beside her. Matthew and Henry joined her. "I still don't remember everything," Charlotte said quietly. "There are gaps I'll never fill. But I remember what matters now. I remember that I have a son who taught his child to bring breakfast to lonely old women. I remember that this simple act of kindness unlocked a miracle. And I remember that we have the power, the responsibility to help others experience their own miracles." 48 children, Matthew said. 48 families whole again. "And counting." Charlotte squeezed his hand. "But that's not the legacy I'm most proud of." "No." She looked at Henry. "The legacy I'm most proud of is sitting right here. A 10-year-old boy who wakes up before dawn because he knows someone might be lonely." who brings breakfast not because he expects thanks, but because it's the right thing to do, who continues the cycle of kindness even when he doesn't have to. Henry flushed. Grandma, I mean it. You saved me, Henry. Not just by bringing me breakfast, not just by helping me remember. You saved me by showing me that the lessons I tried to teach your father 30 years ago, lessons I forgot I'd even taught, survived. They grew, they multiplied, and now they're spreading to others. She stood, pulling both of them up. Come on, we have work to do. There's a family in Nevada waiting to hear if we've found their daughter. And Mr. Patterson mentioned he knows another elderly neighbor who could use some company. As they walked back to the house, Matthew looked back at the garden one more time. In the distance, he could see a young woman sitting on the porch of another house, the one next to Bill's. She was new to the neighborhood, looked sad and isolated. He nudged Henry. Buddy, see that woman over there? Yeah. I bet she'd appreciate some breakfast tomorrow. What do you think? Henry grinned. I think we should bring extra toast. The Charlotte and Matthew Family Reunion Foundation had expanded to 3 cities. They'd helped reunite 97 children with their families. They'd started a scholarship program for foster children. They'd opened a community center in the old neighborhood offering free meals, tutoring, and support services. And every morning, without fail, Henry woke up at 5:30 a.m. and made breakfast. Sometimes he brought it to Bill Patterson, sometimes to the woman next door whose name was Sarah and who'd become like an aunt to him, sometimes to other neighbors, other lonely people, other souls who needed to know someone cared. Charlotte's memory had stabilized. She'd never fully recover what was lost, but she'd built something new, a life defined not by the years she'd spent searching, but by what she'd found. On the 2nd anniversary of her surgery, Charlotte, Matthew, and Henry planted a new tree in the garden, a sapling oak that would take decades to mature, long after Charlotte would be gone. Why an oak? Henry asked. Because oaks live for generations, Charlotte said, and I want there to be something here that will outlast all of us, something that will remind people that love and kindness can survive anything, even 25 years of separation, even memory loss, even death. She placed her hand on the young tree. This foundation, this garden, this legacy, it will continue long after I'm gone. And somewhere, generations from now, someone will sit under this tree and remember that a little boy's simple act of kindness changed everything. Matthew put his arm around his mother. Thank you. For what? For never giving up. For spending 25 years searching. For finding me. Charlotte leaned into him. Thank you for being the kind of man who taught his son that showing up for people matters. That's how I knew you know, even before the DNA test. A man who teaches those values, who instills that kind of goodness in his child, that's the son I raised. That's the legacy that survived, even when everything else was stolen. Henry, kneeling beside the sapling, looked up at them. Can I say something? Always, sweetheart. I know my mom died when I was born, and I know Dad raised me alone for a long time. But finding you, he looked at Charlotte. It feels like the family was always supposed to be this way, like all the hard parts, all the sad parts they were leading here, to this garden, to this foundation, to helping other people find their families. He stood and wrapped his arms around both of them. So maybe the kindness wasn't just an obligation, maybe it was a path, leading us all home. Charlotte and Matthew held each other, 3 people who'd found their way back to family, through the simplest, most profound gift, showing up every day with breakfast and hope. In the garden, butterflies danced in the afternoon sun, their wings carrying them on journeys they couldn't predict, but somehow always knew how to navigate. Just like kindness, just like love. Just like the 3 people standing together in the garden, bound not by what they'd lost, but by what they'd found in each other and chosen to give to the world.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.